Hello, nonprofit leaders. I'm Sarah Olivieri, your host, and this podcast is here to assist people like you, executive directors, board members, and other nonprofit leaders, make a bigger impact with insights, tips, and lessons learned from nonprofit leaders and experts. Having been an executive director, a board member, and now a consultant and coach, I truly understand the challenges you face. And that's why I'm here. I'm all about working smarter, not harder, so you can make a bigger impact without the burnout. And so is our sponsor, DonorBox. DonorBox isn't just a suite of helpful fundraising tools, it's a partner that helps you raise more money and supports you in retaining your donors. I love their forward-thinking approach. Visit donorbox.org to learn more. And don't forget to sign up for the Inspired Nonprofit Leadership newsletter, where you'll get bite-sized, actionable tips just for nonprofit leaders like you, delivered weekly to your inbox. Sign up at inspirednonprofitleadership.com/sign up. Okay, let's dive into today's episode. My guest for this episode is Dacia Moore, who is a transformational speaker, author, and mental health advocate with over 20 years of experience helping people, especially women, move past barriers and step into purposeful, confident lives. She's a former executive director and award-winning business professional, and she blends practical psychological tools with faith-based principles to create real, lasting change. She is the founder of Second Wind Counseling and Consulting, and the author of From Stuck to Unstoppable: 5 Strategies for Getting Your Second Win. Known for her warm, energizing style, she inspires audiences to take action that strengthens individuals, families, and communities. Welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you here. Before we dive into things nonprofit leadership, I'd love for you to share just a little more about yourself personally so people can get to know you as a whole person.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on the show. It is such an important topic. I remember when I first got into the nonprofit business, quite by accident, I was enamored with the leadership. I thought executive directors were on this high pillar and they were just all knowing and all wise. And now that I have been an executive director, I see that that is not true. But that is the perception that many of our staff and board have of us. So I like to blend my mission, my ministry, my vibe, my energy for this fourth quarter living that I'm in is to help nonprofit executive directors, especially women who are leading, to take care of themselves and their mental well-being, because as your mental well-being goes, so goes your leadership. So goes your relationships. It's not just about the relationships at work, although that's important, but it's also the relationships that we have at home, which influence our work. They influence each other. So I'm very pleased to be talking about this topic, sustaining the nonprofit leader, because there are so many things that we have to do, Sarah. There are so many hats that we wear. It can be exhausting, overwhelming, debilitating. It can cause burnout. And that is a real concern that we have in the nonprofit industry or sector right now.
Yeah, I am so with you wholeheartedly, 100, 200%. And, just to feel welcome into our space here, I not only believe you have to take care of yourself to do all those things that nonprofit leaders are burdened with, but nonprofit leaders should not be so burdened with all those things. It is actually not quite that hard to bring in enough money to pay people well and have a big enough leadership team to share the load so it's reasonable for everyone. And I really believe that when you do that, your impact thrives, your ability to bring in money thrives, and it's like you get on this positive momentum spiral. So, let's just dive in because this is so important. Where do you like to start with your clients, when you're thinking of what do they need to put in place first when they're feeling overwhelmed?
Sure. And many of the executive directors that I coach and or counsel feel that they have to do it all. I specialize in working with the small to medium nonprofits. So that's nonprofits that bring in under $5 million. And many of them are grassroots. Some of them are founders. I was the ED of a organization and followed the founder, familiar with founder syndrome. And so with those smaller nonprofits, they feel and don't they may not have the people to delegate things to, but what I find and where I would like to start is figuring out, and this is the best advice that I got when I became an AD, and I just want to share that with you and get your thoughts. My mentor said, Dacia, there are a lot of things that you are going to want to do, and there are
Mhm.
a lot of things that you need to do, but there are some things that only you can do. And as a leader, you have to concentrate on the things that only you can do, like cultivating major donors, like calling major donors and thanking them and having the breakfasts, lunch, and cocktails with the major donors, because pulling in money was the biggest challenge so that you can hire the staff to help you and you don't have to do it all yourself. The other thing is developing relationships with the board. Only you can do that. You don't want your staff to do that. And as a sidebar, I find that there are many executive directors who do not realize or know the delineation between the board and what they are supposed to do and not supposed to do, and what they are as the ED is supposed to do and not supposed to do. So that's a lot in context, but the
Yeah.
first thing is the priority. And whatever the priority is in your nonprofit, let's say it's bringing in the dollars, you have to focus every day for a certain amount every day on that task. Everything else
Mhm.
has to go second. If that is your top priority. So what I find with executive directors is they just come in and they start winging it and start doing. You have to be strategic and intentional and figure out what are the things that only I can do, and that's what I need to do first every day.
Yeah. So much gold in there. I just gotta, pick out a few nuggets. One is, if funding is one of your top priorities, I'd say for anyone listening, if you feel like you don't have more than enough money, like if you don't have enough money to cover your true budget, the one you really want, and extra to grow on next year, and everyone's getting paid like enough to really keep them and to hire the real right people, then that is your top priority. Like, we can just make strategic planning simple for you right now. Goal number one. And I love that you shared from your own experience that major donor, because if it's still the CEO in that needing to be the key driver of bringing in the money because you don't have a development team, then it is going to be major donors like 9.9 times out of 10. It is major donors. If you try to do like big digital, I call it scaled fundraising activities, it will kill you. There is not enough of you to do that kind of fundraising. There is not enough of you to do grant-based fundraising. Those are for larger organizations. So it is going to be maybe at the only cases where it is, I find sometimes it is not major donors, is for organizations who are really ripe for corporate sponsorship. But it's gonna be major donors for most of you listening. So I'm so glad that you shared that as an example. And the mindset stuff, right? Like feeling like they have to do it all. So I wanna ask you a question specifically around that. How do you like, what are some tricks and tools you use? I don't call them tricks because, like, very legitimate skills and tools to help people move from that mindset of "I have to do it all" to "I have to focus on the key priorities and let the other things
Sure.
be somewhere else."
I think it is the skill of self-awareness, and that's the emotional intelligence work that I do with most of my clients. And the self-awareness is checking in with self to recognize when you are starting to get stressed, overwhelmed, or it's becoming too much. Because in order to operate at a maximal energy and cognitive, making sure that you have great ideas, you have got to pace yourself. And that's one of the things that I see executive directors not doing is they go from thing to thing to thing, and they're not taking pauses throughout their day. Now, that sounds like a simple thing, but to manage yourself well so that you make the best decision at every moment, meaning that you figure out what is the most important thing that needs to get done today in order to achieve my goals. Sometimes you do have to step back, just like we finished. Many people took a break during the holidays, right? They stepped
Yeah.
from their regular routine. I know it was end of year fundraising, and now you're getting your financials together in case you get audited in the spring. I got all that. Plus, you have all of the thank yous and all of the things that you have to do to close out last year. But giving yourself permission to step back and look at the landscape and decide, okay, what of all the things that are on my plate in front of me, what is the one thing that I need to do? So pausing is important. We can't minimize
Mm.
because that manages the anxiety and the overwhelm in your body and in your mind. And when you manage that, you make better decisions. And that's what we want to do, is make better decisions. The other thing I would say, and this is so basic, but people don't do it, which is to take your lunch break. Executives.
Tell my executive directors, like, they pay me lots of money for them to say, all right, now let's open up your calendar and I want you to put lunch in every day.
Sure. Well, and they know to do it, but they don't actually do it. They don't behave in that way. So intellectually, yeah, I know I need lunch, but it's just like if your car was on a quarter of a tank or even less, you would take the time to stop and put some gas in it. You are not
Yeah.
Superman or Superwoman. Your body needs nutrition, and it's important to step away and take your lunch because, as you know, Sarah, it is an investment in your mental well-being, which will help you be a better leader. So not the
Totally.
doing is not necessarily effective. Busyness does not equal effectiveness or
It
efficiency.
does. It's so that, and just like, I love the car analogy because the analogy, the other part of that analogy is if you run out of gas in your car on the side of the road, now you're like walking or hitchhiking or calling AAA or whatever. You're getting a small amount of gas. Maybe you have to buy a gas can, right? Like you're bringing that back to your car and then you still have to go to the gas station and fill up your tank. And to me, like, that kind of scenario really exemplifies same for us. Like, if we run out of gas, the time that it takes to recoup from is huge, and the cost to that is huge. Like,
Absolutely.
you
Yeah.
don't wanna run out. Yeah.
I heard a story of a man, he was driving his RV in the mountains in Denver, and before he went up to the on Mountain Road, he said, "I have enough gas. I'm half a tank. I'll be fine." Well, because he was going uphill and the wind wasn't against him, the car or the RV took more energy and used up more gas, and he had to if you've ever driven in the mountains in Denver, there is not there's a lot of wiggle room on the side, and so, as you just said, it took him longer to find the gas, go down the mountain, get than it would have had he just stopped and filled up his tank. As an executive director, you are going uphill. The wind is against you. It is a difficult terrain. And so you have to be prepared and ready for that climb. And that is taking care of your body. And I know, I can hear people say, oh, that's just so basic. That's so simple. But you have a body that needs nutrition and it needs downtime in order to help you to be the most efficient. And when we talk about excellence in leadership, which is what I am studying, is how do top athletes perform under such high pressure? It is because their mental ability is on point and they take the time to invest in their bodies and in themselves. You are an excellent athlete in your executive director role. Maybe it's not an athletic role for sports, but you are doing lots of calisthenics mentally to get it all done. So you've got to prepare and equip yourself to be at optimal level.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I'm happy to go first and share some of my routine for doing this. I think it's really helpful. I would love to know if you'd be willing to share your own routine for
Sure,
taking care of yourself. I'm sure you have.
I do.
Nobody who gets into really thinking about leadership excellence goes there without discovering that great leaders have to invest. It is one of the key ingredients, a tremendous amount of time. And my routine changes like as my season changes. I'm a single mom. I got lots of stuff going on. I race sailboats. I got a whole routine for racing as well. But like currently, it's every morning I'm doing a guided meditation. That's not just, I mean, I believe in all the things about meditation, but it's specifically about regulating my nervous system and, setting my nervous system to hold the breadth of what I need to hold in a day. Usually I'm having a walk. I actually usually walk, meditate out in the woods, and then come back. At the moment, it's 20 degrees or less outside, so I haven't been walking first thing in the morning. I am eating a healthy breakfast. I journal every day. Without the walks, I've started going to the gym instead. I always take lunch, and I almost never work more than 16 hours a week. If you look at my schedule, Friday's blocked off for no work. Monday has no meetings, right? Like before 10 a.m. is blocked off. After 3 p.m. is blocked off. There's all this, and plus there's lunch, right? So I'm always blocking things off to make sure that I have the time to be present for the things that I want to do. So that's mine. I'd love to hear about yours.
That's beautiful. Well, I'm in the fourth quarter season. I'm still working, but so I'll share my routine when I was an ED and what worked for me after many years of figuring it out, and then I can share my routine now. But when I was an executive director, what ended up working for me, I did a time study on myself when I realized that I needed to go after major donors because you think you've got to do the small donors, you've got to send out the newsletter, you've got to be on social media, you've got to have the event, you've got to do all these things. And I had to figure out, okay, I can't do all those things. So what is the most efficient thing? And I did a time study to see where I was spending my time. So Stephen Covey has a book, it's a classic, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And in one of the chapters, Begin with the End in Mind, he has these quadrants where we often spend time in the urgent but not important instead of the not urgent but important. And those things that are not urgent but important are the things where you're planting the seeds. And if you don't plant any seeds, meaning if you don't start developing relationships with major donors, you're never going to grow any major donors, right? So you got to do something. So as I did that time study, I saw that I was spending a lot of time on a lot of little things, and I shifted that. So my Sunday, I would block out the week. I would plan for the week. I would look at my schedule. I am not a morning person, so I would make sure that anything that I did was, 8 a.m. and later. I didn't want to have any 6 a.m. coffees. So I scheduled things around my energy when I knew it would be optimal. And the first thing I did every morning from 8 to 9 a.m. was invest in developing major donors, finding them, reaching out to them, inviting them for a tour, for lunch, seeing if I had people who knew them, because oftentimes, it was a friend of a friend or another ED. So there are lots of meetings that we get invited to. You don't have to go to every daggone meeting that you are invited to. You've got to be strategic. So that's what I ended up doing. And as I began to invest the first thing every morning, because again, that was my priority, it began to show some results. And then I moved from the major donors. We ended up hiring a consultant to assist with the development. And then we worked on the small donors because as anybody knows, major donors are great, but there's a shelf life to a lot of major donors, right? Because then they get interested in something else and they move on. So those smaller individual donors have got to be paid attention to. So I would spend an hour each morning cultivating the major donors, an hour each afternoon cultivating the small donors, figuring out what to do with those smaller recurring donors. And that I always took my lunch, even if it was just 30 minutes, and I made myself go outside and walk around because nature never hurries, yet everything is accomplished. So when you get out in nature, you realize that everything is it's not a fire like it feels like when you're in the office. Everything is an emergency in the office. Well, when you step away, you can bring yourself down, as you say, regulate your nervous system, breathe deeply so that you are signaling to your brain that you are safe, you are in control, everything is fine. And then you go back and you jump into the deep water and you pace yourself just like an athlete. An athlete paces them. Even the award-winning like Patrick Mahomes or the swimmer, I can't remember his name, you pace yourself. And that is a key strategy in success.
Yeah. I love all those things, and so true about nature and about breathing. There's so much I don't remember all the details of the science in breathing, but if you've heard, like, people who are guiding breathing talk about, like, patterns of breathing in and holding your breath or breathing out longer than you breathe in, it actually is manipulating the amount of oxygen in your bloodstream. Like, there is a real chemical thing that you can literally, like, control your body's chemistry through how you breathe in and out. It's not like just, oh, this is kind of relaxing. There is, breath is really important. We need it to live on. And there's a lot going on there. And it's a powerful, simple tool that if mastered, like can change dramatically how you respond to things.
Sarah,
And
let
yeah.
me just say for just real quick, and you're absolutely right. And people poo-poo or minimize the effect of deep breathing. But what deep breathing does from a physiological standpoint, it engages your parasympathetic nervous system. So it is a physiological, biological event that happens when you deep breathe, which is why any meditation that you have begins with deep breathing because the deep breathing triggers your brain that you are safe. All right. And when you are safe, you begin to get calm, your anxiety goes down, and you think more clearly.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up because it goes back as you were talking about, the experience that so many executive directors have in the urgent, important quadrant. I spend a lot of time, I think, coaching with my clients, like, initially who come from that space, like, this isn't really urgent. Like, really, if you ignored this for 2 weeks, really what would happen? Like, let's actually step by step break it down. And usually the answer is, oh, nothing. And once they actually do it, they realize, like, nothing bad. And once people get used to ignoring some of those emergencies, they realize not only was it bad, but it resolved itself. Right? Like, other people and it figured itself out by ignoring it. I think I learned that through my work in the developmental disability space, where often, you learn the skill of active ignoring as a tool for
Mhm.
actually managing a meltdown or, like a trauma release. And so you learn that that's a skill that you can use, that ignoring is actually something you can intentionally do as a solution. But a lot of people don't have that background. So I was thinking about, now I'm going on all sorts of tangents. Like, what are those things that make us think there's a fire when there isn't? And if you could just dive even deeper into how do we get ourselves, because I know this to be true, most of the fires that people are feeling are not true emergencies.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that is a great compliment to the conversation we just had. I used to teach anger management to teenagers. They get so eruptive and with their teachers. And one of the core tenets of managing your anger is managing yourself. It is take a deep breath and calm down, calm yourself down, tell yourself a different story. Okay. So we speak in stories. There's a whole field of counseling called narrative therapy. Brene Brown is excellent at it. And so we tell ourselves a story. So the story I think a lot of executive directors tell themselves is I am needed. I know best. I'm supposed to know best. I'm supposed to have all the answers. So when your staff is coming to you because they're afraid of making a decision, I have a person I'm coaching who is learning how to delegate, but a lot of times your staff comes to you because they are fearful of making the wrong decisions. Well, let me just share with you that you are going to make wrong decisions and you can fix them. You don't have to be perfect. Perfectionism. So what makes people feel like they have to put out all the fires? One is the need to be needed. We are helpers. We want to help. So not only the need to be needed, but the need to help, the need to solve problems, the need to if you have the belief that you should, quote, soft quotes, you should have all the answers. And then the fear of making a mistake, fear of delegating, fear of looking foolish, fear of board retribution, or, the biggest fear, and I'll just say this for me, was certainly if the news got a hold of it. So that's one of the questions. What if the media got a hold of this? Would this cause a major issue? If a major donor got a hold of this, would this cause a major issue? And there's another whole side to that, but
Did that question help you or not
where it
when you
did,
asked?
it helped me because, it put
Yeah.
things in perspective. And then the other thing that helps me is your emergency is not my emergency. And that was a game changer for me because sometimes it comes out of people pleasing where we feel like we have to help our staff and they have to perceive us as this wonderful, magnanimous leader. And we have to have again, it goes back to we have to have all the answers. But when I thought about, okay, will the press get a hold of this? No, they don't care about this stuff. So that helps bring the level of anxiety and importance to a realistic level, right? And even though this is important, like you said, your question was, if you did nothing, what would happen? Now, there's some things that you do have to pay attention to, but it really comes down to bringing that anxiety down in yourself, putting up that index finger and saying, give me a minute, let's think about it, so that you give your staff permission to go back and calm down. You calm down because you want clarity of mind to decide, okay, in the landscape of things that I'm looking at, does this require my attention? Or can my staff person deal with that? So instead of
Yeah.
jumping in, and parents are famous for this. I used to do this all the time until I learned not to. We want to save our children. We want to prevent them from feeling anything. But sometimes that person needs to experience all of the emotions so that they develop confidence in themselves and competency, feelings of self-competency. So you stepping back can actually help your staff begin to believe in themselves to make decisions and gives you the permission to do the thing that's really more important. So there was a lot in that, but managing yourself, again, that emotional intelligence to give yourself permission, as Brene Brown says, to just give yourself a minute, give yourself 5 minutes. You know what? Let's think about this for 5 minutes and let's revisit it so that the emergency adrenaline calms down. Did you know, and I'll just end with this, EMT, because I used to do some training it's called CIT, Crisis Intervention Teams.
I'm trained in crisis, CITs, nonviolent crisis intervention.
That's what you learn. That's what police officers and firemen and anybody who is in the emergency field, they learn how to manage themselves because you don't want to go into an emergency heightened. That's when people make mistakes.
That's right.
Right. I'm in Texas right now, and there's a trial going on about the shooting at the school, and certainly the adrenaline was high. And guess what? People made
Yep.
poor judgment errors, and there
Yep.
was a consequence to that. We don't want to do that, so we want to be wise with our intention.
Yeah. I love that you brought up, just kind of framing like emergencies. And I found in every emergency, highly dynamic or emotionally driven situation, there's always they have different time frames, right? So like when I'm sailboat racing, we have a lot of, and I'm usually racing with I'm leading a team of 4 or 5 in total. And we have opportunities and we have to make decisions. And I lead and we do mostly group decision making, but literally we have roughly 2 to 3 seconds to make that decision. But that doesn't mean we don't use that too. We always use the time we have to stop, think, review the consequences, and get everybody going on the same page. Inside nonprofits, I've seen leaders who deal with, emergencies, mental health emergencies, building emergencies. Maybe, you're looking at taking 5 minutes or 10 minutes, right? But it's the process is always stop, think, collect yourself and collect your team self. If anybody needs to be, totally, you always see the movie, the classic thing from the movie, like someone slaps them, like, get yourself together. We have more skilled ways of doing that now than slapping people. But, so that's, I think, the stereotypical, like the great leader, like make sure everybody else is not reacting out of some emotional space. And in the realities of most nonprofit leadership, I think the reality is you have at least a day. And whenever, somebody emotional would come to me, acknowledge them. I need you to fix this, blah, blah, blah. So horrible what's happening. Say, I hear you, acknowledge their emotions, say, let's check in about it on whatever, at least one night sleeping on it is. If they can wait through the weekend, let's check in on Monday. And, 9 times, maybe half the time there's something to talk about and really fix. And the other half of the time they're like, yeah, never mind. I don't have to meet. Like it's over.
And that goes for your board too. I mean, the board will
Yeah.
will levy some pressure because they perceive an issue very differently than what you perceive it to be. So, yeah, that goes managing board as well as managing staff and managing yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm glad you brought up boards again because boards can be, challenging. There's this very real dynamic. One, they have the power to fire the CEO or executive director, which often makes people kind of go into that default mode of they're my boss, but they're not your boss. You are still the leader, the prime leader, if you will, right? So you have to lead them. And the way the law is written, and it varies state by state because nonprofits are incorporated by state, but actually most boards have unlimited power as long as they make a decision as a group with like quorum and a majority. They're allowed to actually muck in anything that they want legally, which is why it's so important to put into place bylaws that constrain that. Because the reality is if a bunch of part-time volunteers start mucking around in all the spots, it's a shit show. Like you don't make good decisions as a part-time volunteer with no skin in the game. And I kind of like on the volunteer because I think part of what makes CEOs and leadership teams do a great job is it is their job. It is their reputation is on the line, their livelihood is on the line. And so kind of circling back to self-awareness and taking care of yourself is that self-trust piece. And I hear, and we're kind of at time, but I want to get your thoughts on this really like kind of specific thing that I don't talk about a lot is, and it comes up, when I hear CEOs be like, well, how can I give myself a raise? Like, don't I need the board to approve that? And I was like, first of all, if you pay yourself too much, you're going to tank your organization's financial well-being and you're going to have to fire yourself or cut your own wage. It's like a self-fixing problem, but it comes down to that self-trust. Can I trust myself to do the right thing? Do I need to be checked up on? And while checks and transparency are great, I think there's something in there about understanding, like, this is my livelihood. This is my reputation. This is my heart and my passion. Of course, I can trust myself to lead. I would just want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's why board relationships are so important for you to have as the ED, individual, hopefully positive relationships with individual board members, each board member. I'm so glad that you said that individual board members are not your boss. It is the collective decision making that gives you guidance, but the board individually is not your boss. It's them as a collective and in the decisions that they make that give you instruction on where to go. We have to lead our board because they are from outside of the nonprofit world, and if they come from a corporate framework, corporate is different than nonprofit business management, although a nonprofit is a small business. So those are really important distinctions to remind yourself, because a board member probably believes that they are your boss individually and they can tell you what to do, which then requires some training of your board so that you're not the one telling them, but that they are operating in an appropriate way. In terms of salary increase, the way that we went about it is I would read the salary survey that was done by our nonprofit association. They did a salary survey every year of all the different nonprofits in the Midwest, and then those in the I was in Missouri at the time. And then I would share with my board, this is what another ED is making, or on average, what the range that they're making. And I would share that with them. So number one, they would see what a value they were getting, because I was a great leader and I had great support. And I'm saying that in, not in an egotistical way, but I had a great team of people, a wonderful business manager. I mean, I could just go on and on. I loved working with them, and we were a strong team. And then I had a very strong and supportive board. Not all of them, but the majority of them. So, getting that salary survey is important because you need to know as an ED, what are you bringing to the table? If you are getting paid too much, that is gonna, be negative against your finances. But, the chances are you're probably not being paid enough. So there are other ways that you can be paid, but that's a conversation to educate your board. I think that's really important.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it.
Mhm.
Well, we have gone into so many, good things today for those people listening and saying, yes, I need more of this. What's the best way? Who should be reaching out? And what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, my sweet spot is working with small and medium-sized nonprofit executive directors. I would love for you to go to my website, daciamore.com, DACIA more.com. I've got a coaching group coming up in the spring for nonprofit executive directors of small to medium-sized agencies, and it is going to be a weekly group that we can answer questions and figure out things together, because they're unique challenges to the small nonprofits. So you can email me at dmore@secondwindcc.com. I think the information will be in the show notes. You can reach out to me if you want more information. Would love to have you join us for the weekly conversations that we're going to have.
Wonderful. Dacia, thank you so much for being here. And thank you out there for listening and everything you do to make our communities better. Please take a quick moment to like and subscribe and review this podcast wherever you listen to it, to help other folks benefit by discovering the podcast, and share this or another episode with a friend or colleague who would benefit. Until next time, all the best.
You've been listening to Inspired Nonprofit Leadership. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode or the bonus episodes. And while you're at it, please leave a rating and review, and be sure to share with your friends and colleagues. Tune in every week for more useful insights and wisdom on nonprofit leadership. Thanks so much for all you do for the communities you serve. Until next time, all the best.